A gaming phone is kind of strange nowadays. It's like how big luxury vehicles can have lots of horsepower rather than reserving it to light and small sports cars, but that can get expensive. Somehow, these gaming phones end up actually being cheaper than flagships at the time, like the REDMAGIC 6S Pro. That said, this phone is a couple years old along with the pricing, and as always, I'm curious to see how 2024 will treat it. Let's find out. Hello everyone, this is Matt from Real World Review here, and I've had this REDMAGIC gaming phone for a couple years and actually like it, but there are some issues. Let's get started. So the hardware thing about gaming phones I've seen is that they are huge phones, this one being no different. The front of the phone is a large slab of glass with a meaningful forehead and chin, kind of. There is a slit on the top for the earpiece which doubles as a loudspeaker, while the right is where the light sensor and the front camera is. The screen itself is a solid 6.8-inch 1080p OLED panel that runs at 165 Hz and apparently sits at an advertised 700 nits, but that does feel right and never really gave me any issues. The screen quality isn't the best, but it still is amazing to watch videos and obviously play games on. There is an in-screen fingerprint scanner which works pretty well and pairs with face unlock if it doesn't work well. Then the side looks like a two-step aluminum frame with the top having a headset jack, yeah, one of those, and a microphone. Then the right and the left side have a lot. So the left side is where the volume buttons are, and there is a vent for the built-in fan that's used for cooling down this phone. More on that and the little gaming switch above it a little bit later. Then the right side is where the gaming triggers are, this one that somehow got scratched and the other one on the bottom, offering left and right triggers to feel like a gaming controller. Then we have another vent for the fan, while the power button and the microphone sit in the middle. The bottom of the phone is where we get the dual SIM tray, another microphone, and the other loudspeaker, which gives a decent stereo feel, but I think it could be better. In the middle, we get the USB-C 3.0 port that allows for 66 watts of charging, though I couldn't really get it to go that fast. Around 30 watts is more like it, but in real time, it actually charges pretty quickly. The China one can go up to 120 watts, but I have never seen that, and that one also does have a smaller battery. Then moving into the back, we get some interesting stuff. The one I have is Ghost, so the back is see-through, kind of. It is cool, but it's really just a big advertisement. I mean, how else am I going to know that it has an AI camera? No, not the 2023 or 2024 AI. This is back when AI in 2021 was just algorithms. Oh wait. Anyways, the back is glass, just like the front. Gorilla Glass, well, something. They don't say which one it is. There's an area for the 3 cameras with the red ring for the ultra wide, while the middle is the only one that's actually important. Below that is the flashlight, while the left side shows off the 20,000 RPM fan, which lights up but doesn't really change colors. Missed opportunity there. Then there is a touch area on the back for extra gaming stuff, which I forgot was actually on the REDMAGIC logo. Pretty awkward to use, especially with a case. Then the bottom of this glass has a light up red logo, which is a nice touch. No flashy RGB here, except for the fan. It should be obvious that there is no water resistance, but the good thing is that even though this phone is big for obvious reasons and even has a fan, its 215 gram weight is actually fairly reasonable. Now to power the phone, we get the old stuff, like Android 12 with the hopes of Android 13 and especially Android 14. And the Snapdragon 88 Plus chip, which pairs with 128, 256, or 512 gigabytes of UFS 3.1 storage, and 12, 16, or 18 gigabytes of RAM, mine being the 16 gigabyte RAM and 256 gigabyte storage version, with no option to expand those physically or virtually. That said, it's not really needed. Even with heavy games, I still have half my storage and RAM is never an issue. By the way, the battery is a 5050 milliamp cell and lasts a decent amount of time, definitely throughout the day. It actually doesn't report the screen on time properly anymore for some reason. I think it was because of a software update, but I would say that it burns about 7 to 9% of battery per hour on apps like Facebook and YouTube. 5G support is here, as well as Wi-Fi 6E, but 5G will probably not work well in your location if you're in the United States, and might actually make this terrible to use as a phone. Even now, I'm still having issues with the microphone not activating properly on the few calls that I do make with this phone, requiring me to either have them on speakerphone or with headphones. I did have an issue one time with the camera saying that it couldn't launch, but I'll briefly go over the cameras later. Like I said, this is USB 3.0, so you can actually get 10 gigabit speeds out of this port, which is surprising on a non-flagship phone, though there are a lot of flagship aspects of this phone. It's a phone that's a couple years old, but the specs still beat every single budget phone that you can think of besides the Nothing Phone 2. There are some issues though. But let's talk about gaming. After all, this is a gaming phone, and everything I said sounds decent. There are lots of gaming-centered features software-wise, which I have gone over in other videos about this phone, so I would recommend checking out those past videos if you haven't already, but for those that want to understand the performance now, here's the truth. It's still pretty good, playing some games like Genshin Impact or Call of Duty Mobile almost perfectly with max settings. But there is one issue. The phone gets hot. A case helps, but the phone does get pretty toasty, not enough to burn you, but enough to feel uncomfortable. That said, you can mirror your phone through USB-C port onto a monitor and play with a controller. Defeats the purpose of having the controls on your phone, but it is possible. The fan does actually help, but not enough, at least in my test. Even in the winter, I remember this phone just running hot. I do like how there's a switch to jump into gaming, as well as controlling how fast the processor is going to go, but those also barely do anything to help with heat, battery life, and even performance. I personally recommend Eco or Balance because it never really messed with my gaming experience. I also skip over this because I don't really game that much. Shocker, I know, but I spend more time on my channel than gaming. And really, that's because the only gaming features of this phone, besides looks and software, is the air triggers. I do actually love using those though, and they feel like the only reason why you would want to buy a gaming phone. And that's it. This section should be called something like daily usage or using it as a phone, but I call it issues because there are many. Some small, like how the always on display is actually not always on, and also because the clock on that always on display can only be in military time, or some big ones like the microphone. I can somewhat get over the grammar and misspelling littered throughout this phone, but I bought this on Amazon. This is a phone that's meant for English-speaking countries, as well as other countries, but this really speaks to how much they actually care about getting someone to translate this stuff. I mean, you can just hire me to translate. In a previous video, I talked about the turn off screen to listen to drama button, which all that does is just dims the screen. There's just some weird quirks about this phone that make you realize why people go with Samsung or Apple devices. I don't get 5G on this 5G phone, my microphone barely works, and where are the software updates? REDMAGIC is made by Nubia, which is a part of ZTE. When companies make these phones, they have money to fix these issues, but just think, oh, the 7 will be out soon. It's stuff like that that frustrates me, but the benefits to a gaming phone after that is a nice interface with lots of customizability. This one being no different. This phone is packed with extras and has some strong hardware to back it up. I mean, after 2 years, this phone feels smoother than when I got it. I surprisingly don't get many frame drops on any apps. Mind you, none of them really run at 165 Hz, more like 60, 90, or 120, but still. This is a phone with flaws that has a decent amount of upsides. Also, for the cameras, they exist. You have a 64 megapixel main camera, 8 megapixel ultra wide, 2 megapixel macro, and the 8 megapixel front camera, with the only focusable camera being the main, and none of them having any optical stabilization. The cameras are here and can capture 4K 60 frames per second video, and even 8K at 30 frames per second, and even at HDR10, but it doesn't look that good and might not even be HDR or 30 frames per second for that matter. Even the front camera says HDR, but I doubt it. There are a ton of camera gimmicks in here, which further drives the point of being useless. This weird gaming phone is exactly that. It has things like the always on display, double tap to wake, face unlock, and smooth operations, but it does it in a weird way. The battery life is pretty good, but that's probably because this one hasn't been gamed on that much. Would I recommend buying this phone? That's a hard question to answer. Given a good price, I wouldn't say that this phone is a waste of money. By no ways is this comparable to a Samsung phone, but it's pretty close performance-wise. If performance is not what you're after, then I would say stay away from this monster. And that's the end of my review of the REDMAGIC 6S Pro, the gaming phone that isn't much of a phone. But what do you think? Are gaming phones worse or better than what they used to be? Let me know what you think, and as always, thanks for watching.